Narrations.
Truth or dare?
Truth or dare?
Annie sat across from me, her legs sprawled off to the side as her weight rested on one arm and the tips of her dirty blonde hair brushed the floor. Always choose truth. Well, that's what my little sister had told me after I told her Annie had invited me over to play with her. You don't want to end up with Bengay down your bra, Sarah, she had said, shaking her head knowingly. Trust me, she was right, but I wouldn't mind if Annie ended up down my bra. Stop thinking like that. What if she can tell that's what you're thinking? My voice trailed off. Are you gonna choose? She said, smirking. True. Good, Annie said, grinning devilishly. Do you wanna, with me? What? I gasped out. Holy crap, how does she know? You seem like you'll wanna, that's all, she replied. I dare. She raised her eyebrows. You just said truth, she said. I meant dare. Annie closed her eyes and smiled. She seemed pleased with herself for some reason. Close your eyes, she said. I gulped and closed my eyes. I felt Annie's hand slip into mine as she pulled me to my feet and began leading me somewhere. She smelled like lavender shampoo and heaven. No peeking, she said tauntingly, placing something around my eyes and tying it around the back of my head. I heard a door open in front of us and felt Annie pushing me down on a bed and crawling on top of me. All right, no peeking, she said. There was something strange in her voice, a slight quiver that seemed to betray something more than simple nervousness. I reached up and took her face in my hands, and I was surprised to find it was wet with tears. Annie, what's wrong? I reached to take off my blindfold, but I felt Annie's hand clamp down hard on my face, holding it in place. No, she screamed. You can't look. Annie, what? Get out, she shrieked. Get out now. She grabbed my hand and yanked me to my feet, half dragging me through the house and out the front door, which slammed behind me, leaving me there blindfolded and clueless. I laid awake for a long time that night wondering what the hell had happened. The next day I was determined to see things straight with Annie, but she wasn't at school, nor was she at school the day after that. And soon the rumor spread that she had been reported missing by her father. It was after a week of debating what I should do and working up the courage that I finally went back to Annie's house and knocked on the door, shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. Annie's father answered the door. He looked like he was ill. His 5 o'clock shadow was almost as heavy as the bags under his eyes. His gaze drifted lazily about as if he was looking at something very, very far away. They whined slightly when they saw me. Hi, Mr. Everett, I said.
Yes?
He said. But I was wondering, is Annie alright?
She's feeling a bit under the weather,
he said.
Why don't you come in and say hi?
Okay. So the rumors about her going missing weren't true after all. I breathed a sigh of relief and followed Mr. Everett through the house and to Annie's room, where he opened the door and ushered me in. But Annie was nowhere to be seen. I heard the door click shut behind me and turned to see Mr. Everett standing there. I backed up a couple of steps. Sir? I said.
Yes?
Where's Annie?
She's visiting her grandmother.
But didn't you say...
What do you see, Sarah?
What?
When your blindfold slipped.
But how did he know? The truth hit me like a punch in the gut. He had been in the room with us that day. That's why I had been blindfolded. and he was afraid I'd see him. I stammered out. I better get going. My parents are expecting me.
You're a terrible liar, sir,
He said. I didn't see anything.
Maybe you did. Maybe you didn't. But you know now, don't you?
He started walking towards me with slow, measured steps. Thus, when the screaming started, I looked around for the source before realizing it was coming from me. Mr. Everett leaped at me and clapped a hand over my mouth and pinned me to the bed as he did so. His other hand began wandering up and down my body, and no matter how much I struggled, I could not do nothing to stop it. The sound was painfully loud and left a ringing in my ears. What the hell was that? Bang! Bang! It came 2 more times, and I realized that Mr. Everett's hand was no longer traveling over my body. His eyes had gone wide and still, and his blood was leaking all over me. With great effort, I managed to roll him off me, and I saw a strange woman standing in the doorway, holding a pistol and shaking. She sank to her knees when she saw me, and after a moment I realized I was looking at Annie. Her hair had been cut short and dyed black, and the way she'd done her makeup made her look much older. "I'm sorry," she said as I ran over to embrace her. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." We held each other on the floor and dissolved into tears. It wasn't long before the police showed up. I guess they heard the shots. They looked at us and set us on the couch in the living room. They wanted to interview us separately, but I was in distraught and wouldn't let go of Annie. Words tumbled out of her mouth and fast, but I got the gist of what she was trying to say. Her father had been molesting her for years, and when he found out that another girl at school liked her, he forced her to invite me over so he could film us together. After she kicked me out of the house, he beat her within an inch of her life and told her to make sure I hadn't seen anything the next day at school. It was at that point that she rolled up her sleeves to reveal deep yellow and purple bruises. Instead, she stole his gun and ran away, intent on leaving the state and starting a new life. "The gun was in case he found me," she said, turning towards me. "But then I realized you might come looking for me, so I followed you." She turned back to the cop. "He was on top of her when I came in," she said, "and I can show you the website he sells the videos on." She pulled the phone from her pocket and tried typing in the address, but her hands were shaking too badly. The officer interviewing us leaned over and whispered something in his partner's ear, and the other one nodded. "Tomorrow," he said. "Tonight you guys stay over at Sarah's house and get a good night's sleep. There'll be officers out front in case you need anything." They drove us to my house after searching Annie for any more weapons and explained the situation to my parents, who of course obliged to have her stay the night. And that's where we are now, sitting in my room as I type this, hoping that if I get it all out, then the thoughts will stop rushing around and colliding with each other inside my head. I know I'd feel better if I went to sleep, but after everything that's happened, it feels like I'll never be tired again. Well, whatever the case, I know that tomorrow will be a new day, and if nothing else, I'm grateful for that. First of all, excuse me for my not so excellent English. I'm from Belgium. Secondly, I just found this subreddit, and I think this is a perfect opportunity to tell my story. I never talked with anyone about this, except with those that are involved and my parents. This story takes place in Brussels, the capital of Belgium, a couple of years ago. I think it was 2006 or 7. I don't really remember. Well, the story involves me and 2 of my best friends. We'll call them Jimmy and Mohammed. We changed their names to respect their privacy. Well, Jimmy was a French-speaking kid that I met in high school, born in the same district as me. Mohammed was a Belgian with roots in Morocco, spoke fluent Dutch and French, and also spoke a little bit of Arabic. But this really isn't important to the story. On a calm afternoon, Jimmy, Mohammed, and I were sitting on the grass of the backyard of my apartment block. We were so bored, so Jimmy came up with the idea to play this game called Truth or Dare. It wasn't as popular in our neighborhood, but Jimmy knew this game by watching American TV. Well, at the time, we found it cool to play this game, so Mohammed and I happily agreed. It started rather innocent, but after a couple of turns, Jimmy dared us all, including him, to stay a full day in this abandoned house a couple of blocks from my apartment. Mohammed and I have never heard of this so-called haunted house, and so we all accepted the dare. We took 3 flashlights with us, a backpack with bottles of water, and a couple of homemade sandwiches. We told our parents that we were going to have a sleepover at Jimmy's house, since his parents were out of town for the weekend. I kept a diary of the event, and I have used it to reconstruct the story to represent reality as much as possible. Well, the first hour, 6:00 p.m., Mohammed, Jimmy, and I walked to the abandoned house a couple of blocks from my apartment. My diary states that it was 6 in the afternoon when we were walking down the pavement. Well, even though it wasn't that late in the afternoon, the sky was as black as charcoal. I was a little bit hesitant to go in this house, but did not dare to say something out of fear that Jimmy and Mohammed were going to call me names, which seemed silly in retrospect. My fear disappeared quite fast when I saw the little building that Jimmy described as haunted and terrifying. It wasn't as bad as what Jimmy made it out to be. It was a simple little house, although the paint of the door and window frame started to shed a little. The house was built at the end of a dead-end street. On the porch were a couple of dead flowers and a for sale sign. When Jimmy approached the front door, he reached for the doorknob and turned it and discovered that the door wasn't locked at all. He walked through the door opening. Mohammed and I quickly followed. Mohammed tried flipping the light switch, but to no avail. There was no electricity. The only lighting that illuminated our path was the orange shine of the street lamps outside. We sat down on the couch, which was left by what we assumed was the previous owner. I took out my small red notepad of the diary and started writing what we had experienced in our first hour. Well, the second hour was 7:00 p.m. And that is the tale of the previous owner, said Jimmy with a grin from ear to ear. Bullshit, said Mohammed. Jimmy told the story about the previous owner of this haunted house, but it was so obvious that Mohammed and I disregarded it as one of Jimmy's ridiculous stories. Why don't we check the rest of the house? We're not going to sit on this couch for the next 23 hours, are we? Said Mohammed while staring at his watch he took with him. It was 5 minutes after 7:00. Come on, follow me. Jimmy and I followed Mohammed in what we assumed was the kitchen. No light from the street entered this room, so all we had was the beams from our flashlights. Oh, nothing extraordinary was seen. We then followed Mohammed into another room, which led to the stairs to the second level. We went through the whole house, but nothing special was found. I wasn't scared at all, but a feeling in my gut told me that shit was about to go down, but decided to brush it off. In the hallway to the kitchen and the living room was a door. We opened it. When we opened it, we found stairs leading to a room. A cold breeze came from this room, which was probably the basement. The breeze was coming from outside. It was dark down there, and even though we had flashlights, we decided not to go look. We closed the door and went back to the living room, the room with the front door. We took out our sleeping bags and we decided to sleep so that these hours would go by a little faster. I laid between Mohammed and Jimmy, and we didn't talk much that moment. We just turned off our flashlights and slipped into our sleep. The 10th hour, 3 a.m. A fast, loud ticking noise woke me up. I jumped up from my sleeping bag and looked at a sleeping Muhammad and Jimmy. I woke them by shaking them. Jimmy, Mo, I think I heard something. Muhammad woke up and half conscious and started chuckling. All you know is probably nothing. You wuss. Go back to sleep. The ticking started again. Now Jimmy woke up by the noise. Want to go check it out? I wasn't quite sure. I just wanted to leave, but decided not to. We stood up and started walking towards the kitchen. To the source of the ticking, the sound stopped just as we entered the room. Probably the pipes of the plumbing or something, said Muhammad. We continued to look around for the ticking noise, but then we suddenly stopped. The ticking started again, but now the source was placed in the living room. Without looking at each other, we all ran back into the living room. A horrendous smell filled our nostrils. The ticking had stopped and left behind a disgusting smell. Before someone could ask, we saw what was the cause. A dead, decaying dog laid next to our sleeping bags. I started vomiting. I remember running to the front door and trying to open it, but the door was locked. I started feeling dizzy and fell on the ground and lost consciousness. The 21st hour, 2 p.m. I woke up in my bag on the floor of a bedroom, with Muhammad and Jimmy sitting next to me. When they noticed I had woken up, they said, "We're on the second floor. The front door is locked and we are unable to break the windows. We're trapped." I don't remember the moment that well, but I remember crying. I think Muhammad cried with me. We decided to try to get out of the house. We couldn't think of an escape route until Muhammad said that we hadn't looked in the basement yet. He remembered the cold breeze and hoped that there would be stairs to the outside. We ran down the stairs into the living room, ran past the dead dog, which was reeking worse than ever, and opened the basement door. While the breeze touched our skin, we carefully walked down the stairs with the flashlight in front of us. It was pitch black in the basement, and with a jump, the basement door shut behind us. Darkness filled the room, except for the little bar of light 100 meters in front of us, a door leading to the outside. We walked carefully to the door, but then things started to get complicated. The flashlight died. We stood still. We didn't know what to do. The ticking started again from one side of the room and went to the other side. We were frozen. The source of the ticking sound stood right behind me and started ticking in my ear. A wet object, what I later found was a long tongue, licked me from the back of my neck to my ear. Muhammad's flashlight started flickering and shining in my direction. I was freed from my spell, and I looked behind me. A couple of centimeters from my face stood a long, slender creature with a feminine body, a long tongue sticking out from what looked like a mouth without lips. Where eyes should be placed was nothing but empty sockets. The creature had pale, almost transparent skin. We could see the veins through its skin. Jimmy, Muhammad, and I started running to the door. It wasn't locked. Light filled the basement, and the ticking stopped and the creature had disappeared. I ran, and I had never ran so fast. I later found out I soiled my pants, and boy, did I cry. I had never encountered something this disgusting as that day. That is when I decided that I'm never going to play Truth or Dare again. Jared tended to forget things when he was drinking, and he once forgot that he hated cheesecake and ate an entire President's Choice chocolate cheesecake all by himself. Well, the next morning, when he heard what he had done, he threw it all up again. Not because he felt sick at the time, just because he was disgusted that he had eaten it in the first place. Jared also loved dares when he was drunk, giving them and taking them. This obviously made for a very interesting and dangerous combination. The last day of classes before summer break, there was a huge bonfire down by the lake. A bunch of us from film class went, and then we called our other friends, and they called their other friends, and soon enough the lakeside was packed. Anybody could have picked Jared out of the crowd, party animal that he was. He was swinging around the bottle of tequila so much that it was a surprise he could be that drunk, given that it was splashing out at an alarming rate. But that was Jared, and I wasn't surprised to later find out that he had been drinking from a vodka-filled water bottle during his last exam. He was drunker than anyone else at the party, and he wanted everyone to know it. He kept shouting out for contests, dares, anything, just to prove to us how manly he was. The party started to fizzle out around 3 in the morning, and by 4, it was just 7 of us, all sitting around the fire. Some of us passed out, most of us minutes away, but not Jared. Tank that he was still vertical, though barely. By 4:30 a.m., everyone was asleep, except Jared, the hot blonde next to him, and me. I was lying back against a huge piece of driftwood and just watched the whole thing play out. I listened as the hot blonde asked Jared to go jumping off the pier, as he drunkenly slurred to her that it probably wasn't a good idea, as she flirted back with him, and then lifted up her sweatshirt and threw it to the ground, as she dared him. I just watched. Jared never learned how to swim. They ran off, stumbling the entire way, and I just sat there and watched. I was the only one that Jared had ever told that he couldn't swim. I guess he forgot that night. And I just watched. Paraplegic that I am. Well, thanks to another one of Jared's stupid dares.